A homeless woman used to go to the Kedito to collect some products that were about to expire when she stumbled upon an abandoned child in a dumpster. People laughed at her misfortune, but 7 years later, a luxurious car pulled up in front of her home. That day, Andresa had risen early in her small space, the place she called her own. She hurried to the store, as Thursdays were the days they distributed expired goods for free. Over time, Andresa had learned to take advantage of this opportunity. However, a faint murmur from the bushes caught her attention. She approached, wondering who could be abandoning another helpless creature in such a vulnerable state. Without hesitation, she moved closer and found a basket with a newborn inside. The sight left Andresa speechless. She froze, her mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. Who could have left this innocent soul here? Carefully lifting the baby, Andresa was greeted by a soft whimper and a tiny smile. Underneath the baby, she noticed a note, but her instincts took over, and she didn't stop to read it. The first thing she needed to do was care for the baby's immediate needs. On her way home, she rushed into the store and grabbed some baby food, a bottle, and a pacifier. A persistent worry gnawed at her. What if someone thought she had kidnapped the baby? Would anyone come looking for it? The world around her seemed indifferent to the sight of a disheveled woman holding a baby. Once home, Andresa quickly changed the baby's diaper. Luckily, there was an extra one in the basket. She fed the child, who soon drifted off to sleep. Then, Andresa unfolded the note, revealing a carefully written message. "Forgive me, I can no longer take care of my daughter. I lack the strength and means." The note was unsigned and offered no clues about the baby's origins. Overwhelmed, Andresa sank into her worn-out couch, grappling with the gravity of her discovery. Her pulse quickened, and a whirlwind of thoughts flooded her mind. Should she notify the authorities? Perhaps send the baby to an orphanage? Or could she dare to embrace this unexpected opportunity to become a mother? Andresa decided to take the risk. The baby's charm was irresistible. She smelled of sweetness, innocence, milk, and childhood. Her smiles were pure and serene. Andresa named the little girl Emanuela, and her presence breathed new life into Andresa, igniting a hope for motherhood that had seemed impossible just a day earlier. While Emanuela slept, Andresa hurried to the nearest discount store to buy gently used baby clothes, diapers, and even a small bathtub. That night, with the stove warming her modest home, Andresa bathed the baby. Emotion washed over her as she felt the tiny, delicate hands and feet of Emanuela. The warm water splashed as she gently washed the baby. Emanuela seemed to be about 6 months old. She could sit up a little and giggled happily as Andresa sang lullabies to her. Once Emanuela fell asleep, Andresa found herself reflecting on her own past. To be honest, Andresa's childhood was devoid of joy. It barely qualified as a childhood at all. Hers was a story of survival amidst hardship. Raised in an orphanage, Andresa was haunted by memories of her dysfunctional family, her mother's drunken search for sustenance, and the cruel beatings from her stepfather. Her circumstances became so dire that concerned neighbors intervened, leading to her placement in the orphanage at the tender age of 4. Life there was far from easy, but at least she received the basic necessities. She was a diligent student, earning the affection of the caregivers. However, this only fueled the jealousy of her peers, who alienated and taunted her. Andresa despised the orphanage, marking off the days on a calendar as she counted down to her emancipation. Her self-image was fragile. She saw herself as scrawny, perpetually hungry, and awkward. The bright red hue of her hair and the freckles that the janitor, Basilio, often praised, only made her the target of more ridicule. "Oh, Andresa, your hair shines like the sun," he would say. But she always responded with indifference. "Sunshine? I'm tired of being teased for my red hair and freckles." The man would simply nod, offering her comfort. Upon leaving the orphanage, Andresa inherited an aging house on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much, but it was hers. The search for a job was tough, given her lack of formal education and experience. Eventually, though, she found work as a waitress in a small cafe. Thanks to her determination and hard work, Andresa secured her place on the team. It was there that she met George, a dark-eyed construction worker who was instantly captivated by her fiery spirit and radiant red hair. They began dating and over time married. Though George wasn't wealthy, he was resourceful and skilled, transforming Andresa's modest home into a cozy haven. Their life together was harmonious. To their mutual joy, Andresa became pregnant. Their happiness knew no bounds, and they started making optimistic plans for the future. However, the day everything changed came without warning. There were no dark omens, no premonitions that day. George left for a nearby settlement to buy wood for the new fence they planned to build, as the old one was deteriorating. As usual, Andresa kissed him goodbye before rushing off to work. However, as the evening wore on, a growing sense of unease began to settle in her mind. George had not returned, and her thoughts raced in panic. Had there been an accident? Had the truck broken down? But surely, if something had gone wrong, George would have called. As her anxiety grew, Andresa dialed his number repeatedly, only to find it was turned off. A wave of fear crashed over her, and without wasting time, she called the police and the local hospitals. It was then that she received the devastating news. George had been involved in a fatal car accident. The days that followed were a whirlwind of condolences, mourning, and an endless abyss of grief. Andresa, consumed by sorrow, could barely cope. Then, a month after George's funeral, tragedy struck again. She suffered a miscarriage. It happened suddenly, in the dead of night, and although the medical team managed to stabilize her, the baby could not be saved. As if this heartache wasn't enough, Andresa's recovery was complicated by a subsequent infection, which kept her hospitalized for weeks. Her torment grew even deeper when the doctors delivered a crushing blow. "We're deeply sorry, but due to your current health conditions, you won't be able to have children in the future." Andresa was discharged with a heavy heart, feeling utterly broken. Longing for the comfort of her home, she made her way back, only to be greeted by a horrifying sight. Nothing but smoldering ashes remained. The fire had consumed everything: her memories, her furniture, the very walls that had sheltered her. According to neighbors, faulty old wiring was to blame. After all, the house had stood for nearly a century. Homeless and lost, Andresa sought help from local authorities, but no immediate solution was offered. The cold, bureaucratic response she received was that it was her private property and the fire had occurred due to negligence. They were not obligated to provide housing. They asked if she had family or friends who could temporarily house her, or she would consider renting a place. Desperate, Andresa went to the cafe where she used to work, hoping she might be able to rent a room with her wages. Yet even that hope was dashed. During George's funeral and her subsequent hospitalization, her position had been filled. They hadn't even bothered to inform her. Andresa begged the cafe owner, presenting her hospital documents as proof, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. Working informally, she had no legal ground to stand on, no resources to fall back on. In a cruel twist of fate, Andresa found herself stripped of her husband, the child she had been expecting, her home, and her job. It was a convergence of misfortunes that few could imagine. Despair overwhelmed her, and she wandered the streets aimlessly, her gaze lost, envious of the purposeful strides of passers-by, all seemingly secure in their lives. When night fell, she found herself sitting on a park bench like an abandoned dog, wistfully gazing into the lit windows of strangers, catching glimpses of their busy lives. She felt like a superfluous, homeless soul in a world that had moved on without her. Andresa resorted to begging and sought solace in alcohol, hoping to numb the pain for just a few fleeting moments. Train stations and park benches became her makeshift beds. One fateful night, in an alcohol-induced sleep, George appeared to her in a dream, pointing at her with disapproval. "Don't you dare give up," he said. "What have you become? This is not who you are." She awoke with a start, cold drizzle on her face, the uncomfortable hardness of the bench beneath her. In anguish, she cried out, "George, why? Why did you leave me like this? How can you scold me? What's left for me here? I'm an unwanted burden to everyone. I'll end it all, right here under this tree." I long to be with you. For whom should I continue? For what purpose? As her words hung in the air, a deafening clap of thunder echoed, and a lightning bolt tore through the sky, striking the tree beneath which she sat. The tree split in two, sending smoldering shards to the ground, followed by a torrential downpour that blurred her surroundings. Andresa fell to her knees, made the sign of the cross, and whispered, "Forgive me, George. Now I understand. I will stop drinking. Just don't leave me." This epiphany gave her a newfound determination. Andresa soon discovered an abandoned house on the outskirts of town and inquired with the locals if she could move in. A stern elderly woman listened to her story and, moved by her plight, gathered a few items for her. "Take these old utensils, curtains, and clothes. My daughter outgrew them years ago. They're out of fashion now, but they might be of use to you. With time, things will get better," the woman said. Tears welled in Andresa's eyes as she replied, "Thank you for your generosity. I promise to turn this house into a home." In the weeks that followed, Andresa dedicated herself to cleaning and repairing the house. Her hard work and perseverance endeared her to the neighbors, who gradually began offering their help. Before long, Andresa secured a job as a cleaner at a nearby housing complex, providing her with a stable income. The humiliations of begging were now behind her, and she dared to dream again. She envisioned caring for the neglected garden surrounding her new home and began budgeting wisely, often opting for discounted food. Yet, despite the progress she made, the loss of her husband still weighed heavily on her heart. George visited her often in her dreams, a comforting prison she felt even in her waking life. Nevertheless, a deep void remained. She still longed for motherhood. During her early morning shifts, she would watch families. Every morning, Andresa would watch parents walking hand in hand with their children, guiding them to school, their conversations filled with love, care, and little moments of shared laughter. Her heart ached deeply, longing for the closeness of a child of her own, the simple joy of holding a small hand. The nights were the hardest, as she cried for the loss of her beloved husband, George, and the child she would never cradle in her arms. The idea of adoption often crossed her mind, but her circumstances seemed impossibly difficult. Fortunately, her personal documents had been spared from the fire that destroyed her home, and among them was George's photo tucked safely inside her passport, which she kept as a protective talisman. One evening, while she was lost in thought, contemplating the difficulties that lay ahead, her eyes rested on Emanuela, who was now peacefully asleep in a chair nearby. A wave of new determination surged within Andresa. No matter the challenges, she would not be separated from this child. The mere thought of sending Emanuela to an orphanage was unbearable. Andresa made a vow to herself. "If I raise her, I will fill her life with love and make sure she is always safe, even if it means facing hardship after hardship." However, one pressing question loomed large in her mind. How could I get her legal documents? We cannot move forward without them. The next day, Andresa, with newfound strength and resolve, dressed in her best clothes and brought little Emanuela to the guardianship office. With tears welling up in her eyes, she pleaded, "Please help me. This is my daughter, Emanuela, and she is 6 months old. I need to register her and get her a birth certificate." The officials looked at her with a mix of confusion and disbelief. "How is that possible? You didn't give birth in a hospital? Her birth wasn't recorded? How could this happen in this day and age?" Taking a deep breath, Andresa responded, "No, I wasn't registered. I've been homeless, and I gave birth on the streets. It may be uncommon, but it's my reality. Now, I have a place to live, and I intend to raise my daughter properly. But she needs documents to live a dignified life." After a short discussion among themselves, the officials decided to help her. They observed her neat appearance and well-dressed demeanor, along with the absence of any signs of substance abuse. Emanuela, appearing well cared for, swayed their hearts. It took several months to finalize the paperwork, but when it was done, they handed everything to Andresa, advising her to register Emanuela at the local clinic for regular checkups. "You are now officially her mother. Take good care of her. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Andresa tearfully replied, "Thank you so much. May you be blessed." As she left the building, holding the precious documents in one hand and cradling Emanuela in the other, a rush of joy filled her heart. "George, it feels as though you've been watching over us, guiding us through. There is no other explanation." Life began anew for Andresa. Every day at dawn, she would head out to sweep the streets, with Emanuela in a basket by her side, sometimes sleeping, sometimes babbling happily. If Emanuela fussed, Andresa would pause her work and rush to the nearest store to buy whatever was needed to comfort her. The tasks were exhausting, but a single coo from Emanuela would rejuvenate Andresa's spirit. The year passed in a blur of care and hard work. Some neighbors and acquaintances began to notice the child, but many couldn't recall Andresa ever being pregnant. With a teasing smile, they would ask, "Where did this little one come from? We never saw you pregnant." Andresa would respond with a knowing grin. She was a discovery among the cabbage leaves, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "She's mine in body and soul." As the years went by, Emanuela grew into a bright and curious girl. She developed a love for books and art and could often be found helping Andresa around their modest home. When summer gave way to autumn, Emanuela prepared for her first day of school. Andresa, with her indomitable spirit, took on any odd jobs the season offered, from selling fresh vegetables from her garden to cleaning neighbors' homes, ensuring that Emanuela wouldn't feel out of place among her classmates. With a brand new uniform and a sparkling new backpack, Emanuela proudly walked into school, while Andresa's eyes welled up with tears. Ah, the joys of motherhood, she thought, feeling an immense wave of gratitude. If no one came to claim her, it's their loss. She was meant for me. One sunny afternoon, with the scent of fallen leaves in the air, Emanuela returned home, her innocent face revealing a mix of mischief and excitement. "Mama," she began hesitantly, her eyes darting toward the hallway where her coat still hung. "Would you be really mad if I showed you a secret?" Always curious, Andresa smiled playfully. "Well, let's see what has you so excited. Show me, my love." With a gentle tug, Emanuela pulled back the folds of her coat to reveal a skinny, gray kitten. Its wide eyes were full of curiosity and fear, and a soft, pitiful meow escaped its tiny mouth. Emanuela's voice trembled with emotion. "The boys, Mama, they found him near the school and were being really mean. One of them even tied a can to his tail. I couldn't stand it. I had to save him. Can he stay?" Andresa, her heart swelling with pride, lovingly cradled the fragile kitten, feeling its faint heartbeat beneath her fingers. "Oh, sweetheart, of course he can stay. You did something beautiful today. This little one needs a name, though." With eyes shining as brightly as her mother's, Emanuela proudly declared, "His name will be Clementino. He'll be our little warrior." As they welcomed Clementino into their lives, offering him warm milk and a safe place to rest, the kitten curled up in Emanuela's lap, purring contentedly in gratitude. "Rest now, Clementino," Emanuela whispered, stroking his soft fur gently. "You're home, and one day, you'll be our fierce mouse hunter." Interrupting the tender moment, Andresa softly said, "It's time for lunch, dear. The soup's getting cold." Emanuela put a finger to her lips and whispered, "Just a little bit longer, Mama. Let Clementino dream." Gazing at the peacefully sleeping kitten, Emanuela murmured, "Mama, Clementino has found comfort in his dreams. Let him stay a little while longer." Andresa smiled warmly, gently running her fingers through Emanuela's hair. "Take all the time you need, my love. We can always reheat the soup later." Their home, once quiet and humble, now echoed with the playful sounds of laughter and Clementino's soft purring. Whether chasing balls of yarn or basking in the sunlight, the little house had gained a new member, filling it with joy. One pleasant evening, as the smell of freshly cooked dinner filled the kitchen, Andresa's attention was drawn outside. A row of sleek cars, completely out of place in their modest surroundings, pulled up in front of the house. The most imposing car stopped first, and a man stepped out, tapping gently on the window before approaching the door. With caution, Andresa opened it, her heart pounding. The silhouette of the man bore an uncanny resemblance to George, her late husband. Noticing her apprehension, the man began to speak. "You must be Andresa. I believe I am Emanuela's biological father. May I come in? We have matters to discuss." Andresa's heart raced as she stared at the visitor. "George, my love, I thought you were gone. Is this an apparition? A cruel trick of my mind?" But overwhelmed by the flood of emotions, Andresa fainted, collapsing at the entrance. When she opened her eyes again, the concerned face of the man loomed over her. He gently caressed her face, a flicker of panic in his eyes. As Andresa slowly regained consciousness, the man standing over her let out a sigh of relief. "I'm glad you've come to," he said softly. "But I'm not George. I assure you, my name is Vít. Perhaps we bear some resemblance, but it's purely coincidental. Are you feeling better?" Andresa touched her forehead where the pain lingered and let out a deep breath, her eyes locking onto the stranger's. "It's not that I think you're some figment of my imagination," she murmured, her voice shaky. "You do look so much like my late husband, George. It's unsettling." With trembling hands, she retrieved her passport, showing him a photograph of George. "I need to show you this," she whispered. Vít's expression grew sharper as he studied the photo. His face paled, and he murmured in disbelief, This defies reason. Our resemblance is uncanny. This isn't just a twist of fate." His gaze softened as he returned the photograph. "I understand now why my presence shocked you so much. Forgive me for frightening you." His tone became more serious. "Where is the child? I need to explain. She's my daughter." Andresa lifted her chin defiantly, her heart thudding in her chest. "Whatever mystery you think you're here to solve is yours alone. In the eyes of the world and the law, Emanuela is mine. My heart belongs to her, and hers to me. I suggest you leave." Her voice was firm, but the tremor of her emotions was unmistakable. She had revealed more than she had intended, and now all she wanted was to protect the peace she had fought so hard to create. "I have a meal to prepare," she added resolutely, escorting him to the door while wrestling with the storm of emotions that brewed inside her. Who is this man claiming rights over Emanuela after all these silent years? She thought, but no matter who he is, I will not let him take what's mine. She is mine in every way that counts. Inside the house, the sound of Emanuela's laughter soon filled the air. She chattered happily about her day as she savored the warmth of the cabbage soup, her innocent joy warming Andresa's heart. Each day with her daughter filled her soul with a renewed sense of purpose and happiness. The days passed, and on one cold Sunday, when snowflakes danced lazily from the sky, Andresa and Emanuela laughed outside as they struggled to fit a stubborn carrot nose onto their snowman. Suddenly, the distant hum of a car engine grew louder, and once again, the familiar stranger appeared. This time, he brought with him a beautifully wrapped package and a lush, fragrant Christmas tree. Instead of the warm welcome one might expect, Andresa muttered bitterly, "Oh, it's you again. What do you want now? I thought I made myself clear last time." Undeterred by her frosty tone, Vít greeted them with a warmth that contrasted with the chill of winter. "Greetings to you both. May I come in? I've brought gifts, almost like a winter fairy tale. May I join you?" With a swift, almost magical gesture, he expertly fixed the carrot nose onto the snowman's face. Emanuela's eyes lit up in wonder. "You've got the touch of an artist. I'm Emanuela, and this is my mother, Andresa. We love gifts. But Mama, why are you being so cold to our guest?" she asked innocently, her voice full of curiosity. Seeing the enthusiasm in her daughter's eyes, Andresa's resistance wavered. With a resigned sigh, she invited Vít inside, much like a leaf giving way to the autumn wind. As Vít's gaze lingered on the two, it was filled with admiration. Behind Andresa's simple exterior, her fiery red hair and bright emerald eyes, he could see a deep, undeniable charm, much more genuine than the polished mask he was used to in his opulent world. Under her modest appearance lay a grace that couldn't be hidden. And Emanuela, with her vibrancy and visible love for her mother, reflected that same undeniable charm. It was a bond Veit rarely saw in his world of wealth and privilege. As Andresa led them to the dining table, her eyes silently pleaded with Veit to leave the past in the shadows and not disturb their peace. The table, though modest, was filled with love, a simple vegetable stew, sweet pastries, and now the festive additions Veit had brought. It was a feast for both the eyes and the senses. As they ate, Veit broke the growing silence with genuine appreciation. Andresa, I've dined on the finest delicacies, exquisite lobster, the rarest of dishes. But this meal, prepared with such love and care, surpasses them all. Thank you for this feast. Andresa, lost in her swirling thoughts, barely registered his compliment. Her mind raced with questions. Could this man really be Emanuela's father? If time reveals such truths, what will become of us? Will I lose her? Her heart tightened at the thought. After the meal, Veit began distributing the gifts. Emanuela squealed with delight at the sight of a brand new Barbie doll and a large bag of candies and chocolates. For Andresa, Veit handed over a small red box. This is for you, a heartfelt gift, he said, his voice gentle. But Andresa pushed the box aside without opening it, her voice firm. I'm not Emanuela. I'm not 7 years old. Don't think you can buy me or appease me with gifts. I know why you're here, but I won't give you my daughter. Don't even think about it. Now let's decorate the Christmas tree so Emanuela doesn't feel upset, and please, after that, leave. Veit nodded, whispering softly, I understand. I will leave, but not before I've spoken. I have many things to tell you, and I hope that once you hear them, you'll change your mind. The three of them continued decorating the Christmas tree, hanging the ornaments Veit had brought with him. Emanuela was delighted by the colorful, glittering balls, thrilled to have something so beautiful. In the past, they had only ever decorated a modest branch with candy and bits of cotton. After a while, Emanuela turned to her mother. Mama, can I run quickly to Rebecca's house and show her everything? She'll be so jealous when she sees my new Barbie. She's always making fun of my old doll. Andresa smiled softly. Sure, sweetheart, but don't stay too long. Be back home for dinner. And remember, do not go near the river. The ice is still thin, and you could fall in. Emanuela solemnly promised not to venture near the river and skipped off to her best friend's house, her excitement bubbling over. With her daughter gone, Andresa let out a sigh of relief, turning to Veit. All right, you have my attention now. Tell me everything you came here to say. Then, you'll leave for good. Veit sat down on the sofa, his expression calm yet serious. This will be a long conversation, Andresa. Let me start from the very beginning. As for Emanuela, my name is Veit Montero, he began, his voice calm but weighted with the gravity of his revelation. I'm the son of a wealthy businessman. Naturally, I had everything I could have ever wished for as a child. Comfort, luxury, and privilege. My father is a good man, though he raised me with a firm hand, ensuring that I focused on my studies and stayed out of trouble. But my relationship with my mother was always strained. It felt as though she harbored a deep resentment toward me, even from a young age. I could never understand why. The pain of her coldness left me confused and hurt. When I went to university, I met Paulina. She was an orphan and worked in a fast food place. Despite her hardships, there was something radiant about her, and we fell deeply in love. But my parents didn't approve. Surprisingly, my father remained neutral, saying that it was my life and my choice. But my mother, well, she threw a tantrum. She did everything in her power to tear us apart. Despite her efforts, Paulina and I decided to get married. Everything seemed to be falling into place until a week before the wedding, when Paulina vanished. She didn't answer my calls, and I searched for her everywhere, but it was as if she had disappeared off the face of the earth. I didn't know it at the time, but my life was about to take a turn I never expected. Years passed, but I could never forget Paulina. I threw myself into my work and found some success, but my personal life remained hollow. I never fully recovered from losing her. Recently, my mother fell gravely ill, and in her final days, she decided to reveal the truth to me. Paulina hadn't run away after all. My mother went to our rented apartment and wove a web of lies. She told Paulina that I already had a fiancé, that our wedding was imminent, and that Paulina was just a fleeting affair. My mother threatened her, saying she would ruin her life if she didn't leave me. Terrified and broken, Paulina left without a word. When I learned this, I was furious. How could my mother destroy the one thing that mattered most to me? I knew I had to find out what happened to Paulina, what had become of her after all these years. I hired a private investigator to uncover the truth. What he found was beyond anything I could have imagined. He discovered that after Paulina left, she moved to the outskirts of town and rented a small room. She soon realized she was pregnant with my child. She gave birth, and I even saw the hospital records of the birth. But then, things became more complicated. The neighbors said that at some point, the child disappeared, and they never heard from Paulina again. She spiraled into a deep depression, started drinking heavily, and eventually, it killed her. The detective found her grave. Sometimes I visit her there, but it doesn't ease the ache in my heart. Veet paused for a moment, his voice filled with sorrow before continuing. The detective, who was incredibly thorough, didn't stop there. He scoured orphanages, but there was no trace of the child. Then he started to put together small clues that led him to you. He learned that, quite suddenly, you had a 6-month-old daughter. Neighbors mentioned that you had never been pregnant, which led him to a logical conclusion. He traced the timeline of Paulina's pregnancy and the birth, and it all lined up with the appearance of your daughter, Emanuela. He took a deep breath and looked Andresa in the eyes. I believe Emanuela is my daughter. She looks just like me. You just need to take one look. She has my brown eyes and the same curly black hair. Her nose and facial features resemble Paulina's, but I see myself in her too. I insist we do a genetic test just to remove any doubt. Please understand, Andresa, I'm not here to take Emanuela away from you or challenge your role as her mother. You're afraid of that, aren't you? But you don't need to be. I only want to know my daughter, to be part of her life and help her. This would benefit both of us. I see how hard your life is. It's not right for a child to grow up in these conditions. Please don't shut me out. This is a ray of hope in my life too. And I beg you, don't take that away from me. Andresa had been listening intently, absorbing every word, and now she was left stunned by how the fate of Paulina, a woman she had never met, had become entwined with her own. She felt an overwhelming sense of compassion for Paulina, this poor woman, whose life had been shattered so unjustly. Andresa extended a hand toward Veet, realizing that he wasn't the villain she had once believed. She had treated him harshly when they first met, and now she regretted it. I'm sorry, Veet, she said softly, her voice filled with sincerity. I didn't know the full story. If everything you've said is true, then yes, we can do the genetic test. But please understand, I didn't steal this child. She was left in a basket, and when I found her, it was the happiest moment of my life. I couldn't bear to send her to an orphanage. I know too well how terrible and cruel it is to grow up in a place like that. I've had no children of my own, not since I lost my baby in a miscarriage, so finding Emanuela was a miracle for me. You're right, we don't live in luxury, but I try to give her everything I can, even if it's not expensive. I work as a cleaner, and I sell vegetables from my garden at the market, all for her sake. Tears welled in Andresa's eyes as she continued. I wasn't always this poor. I had a husband I loved dearly, George, and we had our own home. We renovated it together, and I was pregnant with our child. But her voice broke, and she covered her face with her hands, unable to go on as the memories overwhelmed her. She sobbed quietly, the weight of her past pressing down on her. Veet, seeing her pain, waited patiently before speaking again, his voice gentle. I know. The detective told me everything about you as well. You've suffered too, Andresa. Drying her tears, Andresa looked at Veet, her expression conflicted. And the resemblance? Between you and my husband George? Did you find out anything about that? It's been troubling me. Veet nodded solemnly. Yes, I did. Recently, my mother confessed something to me. It turns out that before she married my father, she had been married before. And the man she married was George's father. So, in a strange twist of fate, George and I were half-brothers. The revelation hung in the air, heavy and shocking. Andresa sat there, trying to process the tangled web of fate that had brought them together. My brother and I were twins, Veit continued, his voice heavy with the weight of long-buried family secrets. But shortly after we were born, my parents divorced. They decided to split everything amicably, including us, 2 children divided between 2 worlds. My father was to take care of me, while my brother, Nicholas, stayed with my mother. But we were twins. How could we have been kept apart like that without ever knowing the other existed? I grew up in ignorance, unaware that I even had a brother. He paused, his eyes clouding with a bitter realization. Nicholas didn't stay in the city for long. He eventually returned home to my father. And so, your husband, George, was raised by my father, struggling in a life of hardship, while my mother remarried a millionaire, my stepfather, and enjoyed a life of luxury. I grew up in a world of opulence, completely oblivious to the fact that my twin brother was living through such difficulties. Veit's hands clenched into fists. When I discovered this, I was furious. How could my mother live such a carefree life, eating delicacies for breakfast every morning, without a single thought for her other son? How could she keep me in the dark? The cruelty of it. I can never forgive her for abandoning George, for never telling me the truth. It breaks my heart that she allowed her own blood to suffer while she lived in comfort. I was a constant reminder of her betrayal, and that's why she treated me so coldly throughout my childhood. His voice softened as he added, "Now, my mother is sick, with only months left to live. At this point, what good does it do to blame her? It seems her illness is her punishment for all the lives she ruined. But it doesn't make the pain any easier to bear." Andresa sat in stunned silence, tears streaming down her face as Veit's story unfolded. She could barely find the words to respond, overwhelmed by the flood of emotions and memories of George. Looking at Veit, it was as though George himself were standing in front of her alive again. She longed to reach out, to be held by him once more, for him to run his fingers through her red curls and whisper, "You're my sunshine, my little treasure." Later that evening, after Emanuela had fallen asleep, Andresa picked up the gift Veit had given her. She unwrapped it carefully, and her breath caught in her throat. Inside was a stunning mint green dress, made of the softest, most delicate fabric she had ever touched. She couldn't resist trying it on. Standing before the mirror, she admired how the dress perfectly matched her green eyes and hugged her figure just right. She twirled dreamily in front of the mirror, but then, with a deep sigh, she removed the dress and sat down, whispering to herself, "It's beautiful. But where would I ever wear it? Cleaning yards or washing driveways? Oh, my miserable fate." Still, her heart warmed at the thought that Veit had cared enough to consider not only her daughter, but also her. She had forgotten what it was like to receive a man's attention and felt a pang of guilt for not thanking him properly. Days later, the results of the genetic test came back, confirming what Veit had suspected all along. Emanuela was indeed his daughter. From that moment on, Andresa and Emanuela's lives transformed completely, like something out of a fairy tale. Veit purchased a beautifully furnished apartment, one specially designed for his daughter, and invited Andresa to move in with Emanuela. No longer did Andresa work as a cleaner. Veit offered her a job as a secretary in his company, helping her build a stable future for herself and her daughter. But Veit didn't stop there. Like a magician or a storyteller crafting a new life for her, he took Andresa to a beauty salon, instructing the stylist with a smile, "Make her shine like the brightest star in the sky." For the first time in a long while, life smiled at Andresa and her daughter. The harsh days of the past began to fade under the light of this newfound love and care. Veit, with a mischievous grin, told the staff at the salon, "Ladies, your task is to give this woman the most delightful experience imaginable. Do everything as she desires." Andresa felt as though she were walking on clouds, surrendering herself to the skilled hands of the beauticians. She thought to herself, "Not so long ago, I was sleeping on a bench, soaked by the rain, thinking my life was over. And now, here I am, in an elegant beauty salon, living in a luxurious apartment, with a good job and my precious daughter. Life truly is unpredictable." 2 hours later, She stood in front of the mirror, marveling at the transformation. Gone was the tired, 35-year-old woman worn down by life and hard work. In her place was a sophisticated, graceful lady. Her new hairstyle rejuvenated her, and the stylist had chosen elegant dresses that enhanced her natural beauty. For the first time in years, she felt like a queen. As she stepped out of the salon, V was waiting for her in the car. When he saw her, his heart skipped a beat, and he couldn't hold back a low whistle of appreciation. "Oh, Andresa, you look incredible," he said, his voice full of admiration. "I think I've fallen for you, completely and irrevocably." Andresa blushed, her heart fluttering at his words. She found the compliment both charming and overwhelming. Smiling, she replied, "Oh, stop it. But thank you for everything, Veet. You're like a kind magician who's come into my life, into Emanuela's life, and painted it with vibrant colors. I never could have dreamed of a better father for her. She's grown so fond of you. Perhaps it's time to tell her the truth." Veet gently took her hand, gazing deeply into her eyes. His voice softened with tenderness as he said, "Andresa, listen. Our fates have become so intertwined, and Emanuela is the bond that ties us together. How would you feel if we became a family? Truly, officially? I won't force you, but I want to raise our daughter together. I miss her every moment we're apart, and I count the seconds until I can see both of you again." Andresa froze, her mind racing with possibilities. The idea of becoming a family with Veet, of sharing this love and responsibility for Emanuela, felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Could she dare to embrace this new chapter in her life? After everything she had been through, Andresa's legs trembled, overwhelmed by a mixture of emotions. She felt a deep sympathy for Veet, not only because of his striking resemblance to her late husband George, but also because of the man he had shown himself to be: kind, generous, and caring. He was the kind of husband any woman could dream of. Everything seemed to be falling into place for her, as if a new chapter of her life was unfolding before her eyes. With a shaky voice, she finally responded, "I agree, Veet. Let's try this. But we need to find a way to prepare Emanuela. How will we tell her all of this? I can't even imagine." Veet, ever calm and collected, replied, "I believe in always telling the truth. We should be honest with her. Emanuela is a smart girl. I'm sure she'll understand." Later that night, after dinner, Veet gathered his courage and approached Emanuela, who was diligently working on her homework. He knelt beside her and gently said, "Emanuela, sweetheart, we need to talk to you. Your mother and I have decided to get married because, well, I'm your real father. We love each other, and we want to take care of you together. You're our dear daughter. How do you feel about that?" Andresa held her breath, her heart pounding with anxiety. This was the moment that could either shatter or strengthen the world she had so carefully built for her daughter. But instead of tears or confusion, Emanuela's face lit up like the morning sun. With a joyful exclamation, she threw herself into Veet's arms, saying, "I had a feeling all along. Deep down, I knew you were a good person behind that charming smile. Does this mean we're like those families in fairy tales, with grandfathers who tell stories by the fireplace?" Veet's laughter, warm and full of love, echoed through the room. He kissed Emanuela gently on the forehead and whispered, "Yes, my love. Tomorrow, you'll meet a grandfather who's traveled the world and will tell you stories of his adventures. You're going to love him." Andresa's fears melted away in that moment. With a smile as warm as the summer sun, she said, "It's settled then. We've found our family." She clapped her hands playfully and added, "Now, with your homework done, how about a lively game of bingo?" The room filled with laughter as they all gathered around the table, united in a newfound happiness. For Andresa, it felt as though she had been transported back to a time when life was simpler, sweeter. The weight of her past sorrows seemed to dissolve, replaced by the euphoria of the present. The world now seemed painted in brighter colors, and Andresa rejoiced in the harmony she had found. Meanwhile, Emanuela thrived at her new prestigious school, where her potential shone through in every achievement. Her mastery of the English language was rapidly improving, and each day she brought home more accomplishments. As for Andresa, she transitioned seamlessly into her new role at Veet's company, despite the initial challenges of paperwork and learning the ropes. She soon blossomed, becoming an invaluable asset to the business. Veet, drawn to the warmth of their loving home, rushed back every night to the irresistible aromas of Andresa's home-cooked meals and the comforting embrace of their new family life. Andresa had become the bedrock of their happiness. Her patience, grace, and quiet strength served as a guiding light for them all. Late at night, when the house was still and quiet, she often found herself sending silent thanks to George. "Thank you, my love," she would whisper to the stars. "Thank you for watching over me, for guiding me to Veet, and for making sure that love always finds its way home." In those moments, Andresa knew that her journey, though difficult, had led her to a place of peace, love, and family. And with that gratitude in her heart, she was ready to embrace the future. Thank you for reading this short story. Feel free to leave a comment and share your thoughts. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more.